What is going on, everyone? It's your guy Cole Jackson back here on Road Graders, and today we are going to be turning the tide, getting ready for the Cleveland Browns this weekend. And to get us ready for this matchup, I'm bringing in a name that you guys are going to be familiar with, formerly with the Baltimore Sun and the Miami Herald, now with ESPN covering the Cleveland Browns. It's our old buddy Daniel Oyefusi. Daniel, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's a long time coming, so I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
It is, and yeah, thank you so much for your time and kind of cutting up this game. I'm looking forward to it. It's a divisional game, and a game that it's. I would say this looks like your classic letdown spot for a Baltimore Ravens team that is rolling right now, but going against a divisional foe. Even if you look at last year when they won the 1 seed, they still were only 3-3 in the AFC North. So I mean, these divisional games, from covering the Ravens, they're always a toss up. The records go out the table when they take the field. So what's kind of I mean, obviously a lot's happened in Cleveland in the last week with an injury to Deshaun Watson and then entering in Jameis Winston. So, what's kind of the vibe going on around the team right now through practices? What's kind of the set? I mean, with a guy like Jameis Winston, he keeps things pretty light and fun, especially for you media folks. So, what's it kind of like around the facility right now?
Yeah, well, I think that there's obviously a lot of frustration with the way that the season has started because this was a team that won 11 games last year despite a whole bunch of injuries on both sides of the ball. And they really entered this season thinking that they were ready to contend. Deshaun Watson was healthy. They were kind of building this offense around him with, kind of hopes that he would get back to Pro Bowl form. And it's, been anything but that. So obviously a lot of frustration with the state of the way things are going. But you hear it a lot where they're like, we just need to get one win to kind of get the ball rolling, and that's kind of how they're approaching it right now. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of change this Sunday on offense with Deshaun Hurd and the play calling duties being handed over from Kevin Stefanski to Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's also a big one. And I mean, the biggest thing I've noticed, I just got done. I mean, we have a pretty small sample size of Jameis Winston in Cleveland to go off of, but I just got done watching the tape, and it just shocks me how much more Jameis Winston's pushing the ball down the field compared to not only Deshaun Watson, but when DTR was in there, pretty much every throw was under 10 yards. With Jameis, every throw is past 10 yards. We know that's kind of his history. So is that kind of what you're noticing with what a different offensive output's going to look like with Jameis Winston at quarterback?
Yeah, I think we even saw it in training camp. Like this was an offense that when Deshaun Watson was in it, it was very dink and dunk, an offense that really tried to stress teams more so horizontally than vertically. But when Jameis is in there, he's gonna push the ball downfield for better or for worse. So I think that's the main thing that I would expect. Just an offense that's gonna test defenses downfield because for whatever reason, whether it was not seeing the field well, whether it was not trusting his arm, Deshaun Watson would not push the ball downfield.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, the pass catchers looking a little different right now. Obviously, the big trade to the Buffalo Bills of Amari Cooper. I think we all know about David Njoku, Jerry Judy, but a guy that's kind of coming, the rookie making a big step is Cedric Tillman, the rookie out of Tennessee. And I wouldn't say he's obviously not a new player. I think he's been on this is his third year on the Browns, but
Yeah,
Elijah Moore.
second year, yeah.
Yeah. So like, what could you tell us about them for Ravens fans that might not know the full scouting report? Like, what kind of player are we looking at here, and what kind of impact could they make?
Yeah, I'll start with Cedric Tillman because he was kind of the surprise standout from last week's game. He had a career high in targets, receptions, receiving yards, which I guess is to kind of be expected because he was kind of the number four wide receiver. He'd gotten a lot of reps with DTR with Jameis Winston, so I think there was a little bit of a comfort with him. He was a guy who they expected to take a big step in year two. He's a bigger target. He's a guy just kind of is always in the right spot. That's what I kind of saw from him in training camp, and he kind of gained the trust of all the quarterbacks that were there over the summer. Obviously with Amari Cooper being traded, everyone kind of bumps up one slot in the depth chart. He's a guy that really took advantage of those opportunities. Elijah Moore, it's kind of the first full year in the system after they got him from the Jets last year. He was kind of had like a do it all role. He was a gadget guy, a guy they try to get on sweeps, end arounds. This year, he's really struggled, kind of along with the entire offense of those pass catchers to kind of get a groove. But he's another guy that I think that he can make plays downfield. He's more kind of quick than shifty than as opposed to kind of being a downfield, just kind of straight line vertical threat. But he's a guy that can find spots, soft spots, and zones, and get some yards after the catch, which was really what this offense was supposed to be built on entering the year. Like they got a bunch of guys who they thought could separate, who could get yards after the catch, and so he's a guy that should obviously get some more targets with Cooper being out. Cooper being out of town, I should say, and then Jameis, theoretically pushing the ball a little more downfield.
Yeah, I mean these guys kind of fit his game, right? Like a guy like Elijah Moore, known for getting deep. Jerry Jeudy can obviously do that. David Njoku, as far as tight ends go, one of the more vertical threats of tight ends. And then you got kind of Cedric Tillman working that underneath with some of the route running skills that he's bringing to the table. So it should be a very interesting group. And then taking a look at a guy like Nick Chubb. Now this, nothing short of miraculous what he's done to be back this quick after that injury. He's one of those guys, a top 3 running back, and this is a fun matchup where you got kind of 2 of the top dogs on each side of the ball for the running back position, Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. So, how did he look to you next week or last week? And, how long are they kind of anticipating it's going to take till he's kind of back to full strength? Because, I mean, again, we've seen in Baltimore a guy like J.K. Dobbins come back from a pretty gruesome knee injury, and it took him a long time. And then Nick Chubb coming back that fast and still, looking pretty productive, but obviously still not the same.
Yeah, it was a little tough to get a read on the first game back. Obviously, he acknowledged he was, knocking off a little bit of rust. They limited his snaps in the second half of that game, but they said that he did come out fine. And the expectation is that they're going to put a little more on his plate. He's obviously going to get expected to get some snaps in the second half if the game's competitive. But it was tough to get a read for sure because, this is an offensive line that has really regressed and struggled this year. They didn't open up a ton of lanes for Chubb last Sunday, but you did see that power and, being able to push the power sometimes, obviously kind of get his way into the end zone on that short touchdown run last week. So, we still don't really know like exactly what we're going to get from Nick Chubb, and I don't think he necessarily knows as well. But I do expect him to get definitely more touches, and I think that he's a guy that maybe they're going to have to lean on a little bit more than they had expected this early on in his return, just because of the state and the nature of this offense.
Yeah, and I won't lie, as much as I don't like seeing the Cleveland Browns score, I did love seeing him get that redemption touchdown. I think he's going to be one of those, comeback of the year type guys. So looking forward to that. And then taking a look at the offensive line, and I mean, they have a lot of injuries on there. Miles Teller's been out. He just got returned. What was that?
Designated to return.
Yeah. Designated to return. You're better with the terminology than I am. So I know Zach Zinter's been stepping in for him. But taking a look at the injury report, what Teller's been limited through 2. Jedrick Wills has missed both practices with DNPs. Pockich got back to a limited today after being DNP yesterday. Jack Conklin limited. So, how banged up are they? And, is there a chance Wyatt Teller plays this week, or are they kind of expecting a multi-week ramp up for him?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Teller, who, like you said, was designated to return to practice. His practice Wednesday, Thursday. Stefanski said he was hopeful that he can play on Sunday, so I think that's a good sign for his availability. Yeah, this has been a really banged up group, and it kind of stems from a couple injuries that they had last year. Jedrick Wills was out for the year. Jack Conklin was out for the year. Dwan Jones, their 4th round pick from last year, that stepped in pretty well before he tore his MCL. He, was coming back from that. So I think there's only been 2 games where they've used the same offensive line starting combination. So it looks like Teller could potentially be back. Potts, it looks like he's working his way back, and he's like going to be available for Sunday. Jedrick Wills, with 2 DNPs, he's been dealing with that knee injury still. He's been in and out of the lineup this year in his return. So it looks like he's trending to be out. And if he's out, we could see a little bit more shuffling where they bring Dwan Jones off the bench. And, instead of having him at his usual right tackle spot, they have him at left tackle. So that'd be just another new starting offensive line combination. And Dwan Jones has struggled this year. So if he's in that lineup, that's definitely a matchup to watch with some of those edge guys for the Ravens.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways to get to Jameis, right? Make him go through his progressions faster, make him make mistakes, mental mistakes. That's where those turnovers come from. But this is a Ravens D-line that, quite frankly, last week, I know everyone's been talking about the secondary, but they struggled. Like that pass rush group struggled. They didn't get any pressure consistently. I keep saying, I think everyone's talking about we need to get a corner, we need to get a safety. I think the pass rusher spot is where the Ravens need to be looking. And this is a Browns O-line that has historically just been solid, right? Over the last 5-6 years, they kind of have that core with Batonio and Teller when he came over from Buffalo. So, I mean, this is one of the marquee matchups as far as I see it. And when we switch to the defensive side of the ball for the Browns, I mean, we know this D-line's no joke. They got obviously Myles Garrett, who is, one of one all pro type guy. By the way, how fun has it been to just watch him week to week? Because that must be just a thrill for you.
No, it was funny, like watching him in training camp, and I'm like, why do they even put him out there? Like he's wrecking every single play, and I'm like, it's better off for the offense for him to just not be on the field so he can actually run a play. So he's been crazy to watch. I mean, obviously, like by far the best pass rusher I've been able to cover. In the way that he just kind of wrecks games, like at the blink of an eye has been crazy. And, this is with him dealing with like 2 foot injuries and Achilles injury. So this is like a hobbled Myles Garrett that's doing all this stuff. So yeah, he's a freak athlete, like for sure.
Yeah, that's fun. And I mean, they got a good depth too. They got Okoronkwo, who came over from Houston, Zadarius Smith, who obviously we're all very familiar with. But that interior D line is kind of an interesting spot. What have you kind of seen out of Delvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst when he rotates in? Like, how effective are you seeing those guys? Are they making big impacts on games?
Yeah, I think one guy who I'm having my eye out for, spoke with recently was Dalvin Thompson, because he's kind of that traditional run stuffer that they love to put, no shade. He's going to be really big, with some of those inside runs that they have to take on with Derrick Henry. But they will rotate a lot of guys in, as you said, whether it's Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, Mike Hall, their rookie defensive tackle, their top pick in this last draft. He's been kind of getting up to speed, coming back from suspension. They've been playing him a lot, and kind of those sub packages, especially on those passing downs. So they're going to rotate a ton of guys in there, and get, the hope is that they have, like they talk about, the defensive line being kind of like relief pitchers, like you just kind of throwing guys consistently out there. So that's a group that obviously they view as the engine of that defense, and they're going to have to be at their best against this Ravens offense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, every time I watch a Ravens Browns game, when I go back through, there's always someone on the Browns defense that kind of comes out of nowhere. And like I remember one guy from a few years ago was Taki Taki, just would kind of pop up and make plays. And I just found was one of those players. JOK a little bit a few years ago when he was still younger. He's obviously a well-known name now. Yeah, it's different now. But who's that guy this year? Because I mean, the Browns defense always seems to kind of have that unsung hero that does a lot, but you may not notice in the headlines. So is there a guy that this year that's kind of popping out to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, this is a unit that's kind of regressed a bit. They were elite last year. They've kind of just been above average, this year. I think part of that is a byproduct of, an offense that's just, hasn't been able to really support them. I think specifically for this matchup, a guy that I'm going to have my eye out for is Grant Delpit. I think that I would expect him to really focus on the run game, getting some extra guys in the box. And he's a guy they like to move around a lot. So like they like to put him in the box. He views himself as like the best man coverage safety in the NFL. So especially if Zay Flowers can't go and maybe the Ravens are leaning on those 2-3 tight end sets, he's a guy that's not only going to be counted on as to be an extra defender in the box and stop Derrick Henry, but he's going to be matched up with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews on a lot of pass plays. So he's a guy that I think could be a sort of kind of X factor for the Browns' defensive game plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, it does 2 DNPs for Zay Flowers back to back. I mean, it was kind of strange. I was shocked that he kind of went no participation through 2 days, given that he finished the game. He definitely didn't look the same. But with ankle injuries, stuff can happen post game when the adrenaline wears off, that sort of thing. But that is a key piece to this matchup, because we haven't seen, well, sorry, I shouldn't say we haven't seen. We've seen in the last few weeks when this pass game got going where teams would stack the box and then the Ravens were ripping them up through the air. But, not having a guy like Zay with this 12 personnel dominant offense that they have, that's when you get back to like, now we have Nelson Aguilar, now we have Tylan Wallace playing big snaps. So can those guys make the plays on the edge to keep that defense honest? And is that where the Browns can gain an edge? And that's just, again, one of those things with these divisional matchups where I feel like it can get ugly, not in terms of a blowout or anything, but ugly in terms of sloppy football in an AFC North, kind of slobber knocker where, they're just forcing the run because they're trying to make up for the pass. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that I'm looking at. And I can really see how Grant Delpit can kind of fit into, that framework and be that difference maker. And then when we take a look at, obviously the approach to Lamar Jackson has been tough. It used to be play basically cover 3, stack the box, force him to make outside throws. And like I just said, that's not really worked for defenses the past few weeks. Lamar's making passes this year. He just looks more comfortable in the pocket. The consistency is on another level. So what kind of approach are you kind of expecting from that Browns defense? Do you think it is that heavy, box stacking, take away the run, make him kill you in the air? Or do you think with the success through the air in the last few weeks, we might see something a little bit different out of the Browns?
Yeah, I actually spoke to a Browns defender today in the locker room, and I was, just kind of talking about the Ravens and the matchup, and I mentioned like, hey, they're throwing the ball a lot more than they used to, and he goes, yeah, but they still running the ball, and he's like, they want to run the ball, and he was like, that's where it really starts, and I think that's really going to be the focus for this Browns defense. Jim Schwartz, and talking about this offense, he mentioned that this is the type of offense where you can say we're going to stop the run, or we're going to stop Lamar's legs, or vice versa, we're going to stop the pass, and because they're just that dynamic. But I think that they still do understand that Derrick Henry and his success has really been, driving this offense these last couple of weeks during this win streak. And again, as the defender said, their kind of mindset is that, hey, like everything still starts with the run. And they have a lot of confidence in their secondary and their cornerbacks. They play a lot of man-free schemes. So I do expect them to, kind of focus on stopping Derrick Henry, stopping the run game, and then, I don't want to say take their chances on the outside, but I think that they feel confident about those that matchup. The Ravens wide receivers against their cornerbacks, whether it's Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman or whoever it may be against Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, and Greg Newsome in the slot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, that's really how this has gone the last few weeks. And even if you go back to kind of the Cowboys and who they play right after the Cowboys, it's escaping me, the Bills, the Cowboys and the Bills games, they just never really stopped the run. So they just kept running it. And that's really been the difference with this Ravens offense from offenses in the past is, we've seen Todd Monken make those adjustments really early in the game rather than kind of Greg Roman forcing the run game throughout that we had for years. And that's been one of the biggest game changers. So that's kind of what I'm expecting too. So love hearing that, love hearing the feedback from some of their coaches, some of the thoughts from some of the players, love hearing that kind of insight. So we really appreciate that. And I know the folks watching right now are going to appreciate that Maryland sweater. We see that. So I know you got the Maryland rep in your blood. So I absolutely love that. So we won't keep you here much longer. I really appreciate your time that you lend to us, giving us some of that insight from what's going on around the Browns facility and their locker room. We appreciate it. So you can find Dan over on Twitter at Daniel Oyefusi on Twitter, and then all of his articles, obviously, on ESPN. He also has his own website. You can find the link in the bio on his Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.